Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel. Enjoy the listening. The aliens celebrated too soon. Until humans enforced rule number one. Commander Vexer stood on the bridge of the Conquest-class warship Inevitable Victory, his forearms crossed in satisfaction as he gazed upon the blue-green planet through the viewport. His scaled skin glimmered under the command center's lights, and the membranes above his three eyes pulsed with a pleasant purple hue, the Krathane equivalent a smug smile. Status report, he demanded, not bothering to turn around. He knew what the answer would be. They all did. 97% of human military installations neutralized, Commander, replied Lieutenant Sayers, her voice carrying that particular clip that came with barely suppressed excitement. Remaining resistance is fragmented and uncoordinated. Their global communication networks have been severed. Victory parameters achieved with minimal casualties to our forces. Vexer allowed a low, rumbling laugh to escape his throat sacs. Minimal casualties? Ha! Try zero casualties. The humans and their precious Earth. So much bravado, so much chatter across the galactic networks about being the species you don't want to mess with. And yet here we are. 3 standard rotations, and the so-called apex predators of the galaxy are scurrying about like, what's that Earth vermin they always mention in their transmissions? Cockroaches, sir, offered Communications Officer Peller without looking up from his console. Yes, cockroaches, scuttling about in the dark, hiding from the light of Krathane's superiority. Vexer threw back his head, his laughter now echoing throughout the command bridge. Several junior officers joined in, not because they found it particularly funny, but because they knew better than to remain silent during one of the commander's moments of self-congratulation. Vexer turned finally, sweeping his gaze across the bridge crew. Do you know why we've succeeded where others have failed? Why the mighty Zorlik Imperium turned tail and fled? Why the Belthor Collective signed that pathetic non-aggression pact? The question was rhetorical. They'd all heard this speech during mission briefing, in pre-launch and mid-journey, and upon entering the Sol system, and yet again before the invasion began. But no one would dare interrupt. Because, Vexer continued, puffing out his throat sacs to their full, impressive size, they all bought into the myth of human ingenuity, the myth of human adaptability, the myth of human. What's the word they love so much? Tenacity, sir, supplied Tactical Officer Kren-2, who had been making a study of human psychological warfare. Tenacity, yes. Vexer slammed one of his lower fists onto the nearest console, causing a junior officer to flinch. But the Grand Strategic Council saw through the deception. Humans aren't special. They're just loud. They're just, what's that Earth phrase? All bark and no bite. A chorus of dutiful agreement rumbled through the bridge. We studied their weaknesses, Vexer said, his voice dropping to something almost resembling reverence. We observed their divisions, their petty squabbles, their inability to unite even in the face of planetary crisis. We struck with precision. We struck with overwhelming force. And most importantly, he paused for effect, we struck without warning. The Council's strategy was flawless. Agreed, Sub-Commander Yexhal said from her station. The traditional response in their victory litany. As it always is, the bridge crew replied in unison. Vexer turned back to the viewport, his eyes narrowing as he watched the smoldering remains of what had once been a human military base. Prepare the landing parties. I want prisoners, the high-valued targets on our acquisition list. Military leaders, scientists, political figures. Let's find out if humans are as fragile individually as they were collectively. He paused, adding with a confident sneer, and someone prepare my speech of acceptance for their surrender. It should be appropriately magnanimous. After all, the Krathane Empire is nothing if not generous to its new subjects. Little did Commander Vexer know, the greatest rule of warfare was about to slap him across all 3 of his smug, self-satisfied eyes. The descent to Earth's surface was almost disappointingly smooth. Vexer had expected something, anything. A last-ditch missile barrage, a desperate aerial counterattack. Even some primitive ground-to-air weaponry would have given him the satisfaction of crushing resistance. But no, the humans had been thoroughly beaten. Landing zone secure, Commander, reported Captain Drieskor, leader of the ground forces. Local military presence has been neutralized. We're encountering only scattered civilian presence. Most appear to be in hiding. Excellent. Proceed with Phase 2. Vexer ordered as he stepped off the shuttle ramp onto actual Earth soil. He inhaled deeply through his sensory slits, analyzing the composition, nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, And was that fear? Yes, the distinct pheromone signature of mammalian terror. Delicious. The landing site had once been some sort of governmental complex, the Pentagon, if Vexer recalled correctly from the briefings. Now it was little more than a smoking crater with a few structural elements still standing, perfect symbolism for the fallen human military might. Round up any survivors for processing, Vexer commanded, waving two of his arms dismissively as he strode forward. I want the high-value targets identified and separated. The rest can be processed for labor assignment. Commander, we've already secured several promising specimens, Driscoll said, his voice betraying a hint of eagerness that would normally be considered unseemly for a Crethine officer. But today was special. Today was historic. Vexer followed his ground commander to a makeshift holding area where approximately 30 humans were being kept under guard. Most were in various states of shock, dirty, injured, and clearly broken in spirit. Some wept openly, a display of weakness that made Vexer's throat sacs inflate with amusement. This one, Driscoll said, pointing to a human female in what remained of a military uniform. According to identification records, she's General Morgan Rivera, commander of their North American Defense Forces. Vexer approached the human, towering over her by at least 2 head lengths. She glared up at him, her face bloodied but her eyes still burning with what the commander assumed was impotent rage. General Rivera, Vexer pronounced the alien syllables with practiced precision. I must congratulate you on surviving our initial assault. Not many of your colleagues were so fortunate. Go to hell, she spat, literally, a glob of red-tinged saliva landing near Vexer's foot. The commander's personal guard moved to strike her, but Vexer held up a restraining hand. No, no, no. Let the human express herself. It's important for the soon-to-be extinct to have their final words. He circled Rivera slowly, examining her like one might examine an interesting but ultimately insignificant specimen. You know, we studied your species extensively before this invasion. Your history, your psychology, your physiology. Do you know what we found most interesting? Rivera remained silent, her jaw clenched. Your delusions, Vexer continued. Your species' persistent belief that you are somehow special in this galaxy, that you would rise to any challenge, that you would, against all odds, prevail. He leaned down, his face mere inches from hers. Where is that famous human spirit now, General? Where is what do you call it? Your cavalry? Your reinforcements? Your miracle solution? The general's eyes flicked briefly to something over Vexer's shoulder, but her expression gave nothing away. Take her to the command ship, Vexer ordered, straightening up. Her and any others identified as leadership. I want full neurological scans and memory extraction. If there are any human resistance plans still in motion, I want to know about them immediately. As Rivera was roughly dragged away, Vexer couldn't help but notice something peculiar about her expression. It wasn't the look of someone defeated. It wasn't even the look of someone defiant in the face of inevitable doom. It was the look of someone waiting. The detention level of the inevitable victory was designed to break spirits as much as to contain bodies. The lighting oscillated at frequencies specifically calculated to disrupt human circadian rhythms. The temperature fluctuated between uncomfortably warm and bone-chillingly cold. Heat and the gravity was manipulated to be just slightly stronger than Earth's standard, enough to wear down the prisoners physically over time. None of this seemed to bother the human male in cell block 7G. Prisoner continues to display anomalous behavior, reported Chief Interrogator Mavlik, his normally steady voice tinged with frustration. Subject identified as Commander Jack Reeves, United Earth Defense Force, Tactical Division. Vexer reviewed the surveillance footage with growing irritation. Unlike General Rivera and the other captured humans who showed appropriate levels of despair, this Reeves character was humming. Yes, humming some annoying Earth melody while doing what appeared to be physical exercises in his cell. What information have you extracted from him? Vexer demanded. Mavlik's secondary eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of embarrassment among their species. That's the concerning part, Commander. We've applied standard neural extraction techniques. We've utilized chemical interrogation. We've even employed psychological pressure points based on our research of human behavioral weaknesses. He's given us nothing of value. Just jokes. Jokes? Vexer's throat sac deflated in confusion. Yes, sir, bad ones. About our appearance, our names, our ship. He called our neural extractor a fancy egg beater and suggested we use it to make omelets. Some Earth food, apparently. Vexer growled, a low rumbling sound that caused subordinates to take a step back. Bring him to me. Now. 20 minutes later, Commander Jack Reeves was escorted onto the bridge by 4 armed guards. Despite 5 days in captivity, the human looked remarkably composed. His uniform was tattered and dirty, his face sported several bruises, but his posture remained straight, almost relaxed. Most disturbing to Vexar was the human's expression, a slight upward curve of the lips that humans called a smile. Commander Reeves, Vexar began, intentionally using the human's title as a psychological manipulation tactic. I trust your accommodations have been adequate. Reeves glanced around the bridge, seemingly more interested in the technology than in Vexar's intimidating presence. Could use a minibar and some better pillow mints, but I've stayed in worse hotels. His eyes finally settled on the alien commander. Nice ship you've got here. Bit ostentatious with the name, though, don't you think? Inevitable victory. Talk about tempting fate. One of the guards struck Reeves across the back, causing him to stumble slightly, but the human just straightened up again, that unsettling smile never leaving his face. You seem remarkably upbeat for someone whose species has been conquered, Vexar observed, circling the human slowly. Reeves shrugged. Day's not over yet. He's doing what now? Vexar's voice escalated to a pitch rarely heard from a Krethian of his rank and stature. Lieutenant Zarkesh, who had drawn the unfortunate duty of delivering the latest report, shifted uncomfortably. Commander Reeves appears to be teaching the other human prisoners to sing, sir. Some Earth composition called Bohemian Rhapsody. It's quite lengthy, and according to our cultural database, contains nonsensical references to something called Scaramouche and doing the fandango. Vexar's 3 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of profound Krethian confusion. And General Rivera? She's participating, sir, enthusiastically, particularly during the segments that involve multiple harmonic layers. The commander paced the length of his private quarters, all 4 arms clasped behind his back. This was not proceeding according to the invasion protocols. The humans should be broken by now. Depressed, divided, turning against each other as their resources dwindled. Instead, they were forming what the humans called a choir. It makes no sense, he muttered. Their civilization is in ruins, their militaries decimated, their leaders captured or dead, their remaining forces scattered without central command. By all measurable metrics, they have lost. Sub-Commander Yexhall, who had been silently observing from a corner, finally spoke up. Perhaps, sir, that's precisely why they're behaving this way, a form of psychological denial, the final desperate attempt of a defeated species to maintain morale. Vexar considered this. It seemed plausible, yet something nagged at him, a discordant note in an otherwise perfect victory symphony. He activated his command console and pulled up the latest planetary status reports. What about the resistance efforts? Any patterns emerging? Tactical Officer Cruz stepped forward, consulting his datapad. Scattered and ineffective as expected, Commander, although he hesitated. Although what? Speak freely, officer. There's something unusual about their attack patterns, sir. They're not targeting our primary military assets or attempting to recapture strategic positions. They're hitting targets that appear almost random, communication relay stations, minor supply depots, even some completely abandoned human facilities that we've never occupied. Vexar's throat sacs pulsed with irritation. Show me. A holographic map of Earth appeared above the console, with red dots indicating resistance attacks. At first glance, they did indeed seem random, scattered across continents with no obvious strategic value. And what about our casualties? Vexar demanded. Minimal, sir. That's the other peculiarity. They're not actually trying to inflict maximum damage on our forces. They strike, disable the target, and withdraw before our response teams arrive. Vexar stared at the map, his tactical mind trying to discern a pattern where none seemed to exist. It's as if they're not even trying to win. What game are these humans playing? At that moment, the ship's alert system activated. But Junior Communications Officer's voice came through. Commander, we've lost contact with outposts K7 through K13. All communication systems are down. Re-establish contact immediately. Vexar barked. We're trying, sir, but there's some kind of interference pattern we've never encountered before. It's almost as if the transmission cut off abruptly. The holographic map flickered and died. The lighting in Vexar's quarters dimmed momentarily before emergency systems kicked in. What in the 7 moons of Krathi is happening? Vexar demanded of no one in particular. Sub-Commander Yexhall was already at a backup terminal. Sir, we appear to be experiencing a ship-wide system fluctuation. Nothing critical has failed, but we're seeing unexplained power surges throughout the fleet. Vexor's membranes darkened with growing concern. Bring me Commander Reeves. Now. Commander Reeves was frog-marched onto the bridge, still humming that infuriating melody. This time, however, Vexor noticed something different in the human's demeanor. The casual confidence remained, but there was a new intensity in his eyes, a predatory gleam that made the commander's scales bristle involuntarily. Your resistance efforts are futile, Vexor began without preamble, his voice deliberately calibrated to project absolute authority. Your forces are mounting disorganized, ineffective attacks that accomplish nothing. Explain this irrational behavior. Reeves glanced at the tactical display, which showed the scattered red dots of human resistance activity. His lips quirked upward. Looks pretty organized to me. Organized. Vexor sputtered, his composure slipping. There's no pattern, no strategic value to these targets. It's the desperate flailing of a beaten species. Reeves cocked his head to one side. You really don't see it, do you? He chuckled, the sound sending an inexplicable chill through Vexor's exoskeletal plates. For an advanced space-faring civilization, you guys missed something pretty basic. The bridge had grown unnaturally quiet. Even the ever-present hum of the ship's systems seemed muted, as if the vessel itself was listening. Let me ask you something, Commander Vexor, Reeves continued, taking a casual step forward that somehow made the armed guards tense up. In all your extensive studies of human history, what's the one consistent pattern you've observed when we're invaded? When we're outgunned, outmanned, and supposedly defeated? Vexor narrowed all three eyes. Your species has never faced an interstellar invasion before. No, but we had plenty of practice with each other, Reeves countered. Napoleonic Wars, World War II, countless insurgencies and resistance movements. When conventional warfare fails, humans don't just give up. We adapt. A warning klaxon suddenly blared throughout the bridge. Lieutenant Zarkesh frantically worked her console. Sir, we're detecting massive energy surges from those supposedly random targets the humans have been hitting. Which brings me to rule number 1, Reeves said, his voice cutting through the growing chaos like a plasma blade. Never, ever assume you've beaten humanity just because you've won the first battle. Vexor's throat sac constricted in sudden apprehension. What have you done? Those random targets? Network nodes. We let you take out our main communications in your initial attack, but Earth's militaries have had contingency plans for global communication loss for centuries. Those old facilities, abandoned outposts, and seemingly worthless relay stations. They're part of a backup system, a shadow network designed to activate only when everything else is gone. The tactical display suddenly lit up with hundreds, no, thousands of new signals, creating a web of light across the holographic Earth. And while your attention was focused on the big boom of your invasion, Reeves continued, his smile now downright terrifying small,